Taiwan has 16 officially recognized indigenous peoples, numbering around 500,000 in total. Each community has its own unique traditions and history, but you're not very likely to see this when Taiwan comes up on your TV or computer screen. So, how should Taiwan promote the richness of its indigenous cultures in a sustainable way? Well, to get some insights into Taiwan's tourism industry, we welcome back Wagi Payan, assistant professor at Dong Hwa University, speaking to us from Taipei, and from Taichung, Cheryl Robbins, a freelance tour guide based in Taiwan. Wagi, what kind of problems can result from excessive tourism? What kind of effects are you seeing on the ground in the communities that come from too many people coming too often?
I think there are a few things that could be harmful to indigenous communities. And first will be the cultural carrying capacity is exceeded, and the profit flows actually mostly go to the intermediaries, and the cultural becomes simplified and commodified. So if I'm not quite sure if this can be changed soon or fast, because structurally speaking, it's very difficult because the communities can, if we can let them choose not to participate, that probably will be one of the solutions. And also other successful alternatives. Well, there are some examples exist. For example, in Kiwi village in Hualien, they offer high quality cultural rafting tour. And smart cruise I mentioned earlier in Hsinchu, they have the accommodation caps to preserve their daily rhythm. So they don't want too many tourists to come at the same time because the quality will be totally different. But all this requires strong collective consensus and cultural confidence, and often alternative income resources. So in our cases, I feel the sustainability is not just the environmental, it's more difficult in some way. And that in the social, the cultural and the social sustainability.
Well, Cheryl, as Wagi said, this system, this model that we see in the Taiwanese tourism industry may not be very easy to change. It currently seems to favor high volumes and low margins. But do you think it is even feasible to want to change the system or to push for changes in the system and bring it more towards a sustainable model with maybe fewer people and higher, quality experiences?
Well, to achieve sustainability, the system has to change. Now, is it feasible? Yes, but it requires changing of mindsets, and that's very difficult, especially when travel agencies maybe have been doing these kinds of tours for a while, and they feel maybe it's working for them in terms of profit. Then there doesn't become a lot of motivation. There's not a lot of motivation on their part to change. So I think, as Wagi mentioned, it's up to the communities to have a little bit of pushback, and that is we want to preserve our culture. We want to preserve our environment. We want to preserve our way of life, and this has to be the first priority over a travel agency's profits, especially as I think, as was also mentioned, that communities themselves probably aren't profiting as much off of the current system. So in the past 13 years since I've been a tour guide, I've been trying to develop a model that's based on small tours that has lower volume but higher profit margin, and hopefully it can create more of a win-win-win situation, meaning for the travel agent, for the communities, for the clients. But it's been difficult because, as Wagi just said in the last segment, Taiwan's tourism industry focuses only on tourist numbers. So that's the only measure of success. But I think in order for the system to really change, I think that the tourism industry legislation needs to change, and that will be difficult. So as I mentioned in an earlier segment, making it so that Indigenous communities can sell their itineraries directly to international clients so that they can control their tourism, they can control their narrative, they can control how many people come, they can have full control over every aspect of tourism. And that's the only way that tourism into Indigenous communities can become sustainable.
Well, Wagi, you mentioned profit sharing in the first part of our discussion as perhaps an alternative model to what we see on the ground right now. Are there communities that are actually implementing these kind of models successfully, and or is this still in the realm of ideas?
I think there are communities working into that direction to value or to work on a different logic, because the profit sharing used to be a totally economic logic. But if we can base it on cultural values, for example, we value our elders' knowledge in a different way, not in money, not in currency, or we use a different way to evaluate the land or cultural resources. It's actually a concept called the relational economy. And if we can use this kind of lens to look at the things we're doing or to change our ways of thinking, maybe there is a way to change to challenge the system. So our goal is not solely based on the cash distribution, but to focus on the collective well-being. If we can think about the development, tourism development in this way, probably we'll be able to challenge the current system.
Well, Cheryl, I want to focus a little bit on the environmental impact and environmental sustainability. Do you think that Indigenous tourism can be made fully environmentally sustainable? Are solutions like maybe capping the total number of visitors, similar to what we see in places like Palau, or maybe capping the size of a group or of individual groups, are those good tools to force that environmental sustainability?
In some places, yes, maybe, because some communities are very popular. So Wagi mentioned Simakusi, so they have a lot of visitors. So capping visitors in such places might be a good idea. I worry a bit about the uptick in the popularity of camping, because I see a lot of Indigenous communities clearing spaces to create campgrounds. And so I worry about if too many of those such spaces are cleared, how it will affect the community.
Well, we are slowly running out of time, but I do want to talk about one more big aspect of this situation, which is promoting tourism abroad and domestically. Cheryl, do you think Taiwan is properly promoting the indigenous aspect of its total tourist offering? And is it doing it the right way? And if not, how could things be improved?
Well, I would like to see more promotion of Indigenous culture in tourism promotion, but I would like to see it done more with maybe specialty travel agencies in mind, rather than maybe going to travel fairs and marketing the cheap standard Indigenous community tours. So I would like to see Taiwan, yes, when they promote, to include more of the Indigenous theme that often doesn't get included. And when it does, it's usually just a song and dance performance. And I would like to see that the Indigenous culture more richly, the richer aspects of Indigenous culture to be promoted, and in an authentic way, in an honest way. And then I hope that Taiwan can also promote more to specialty travel operators.
Well, Wagi, what kind of hopes and expectations do you have towards the tourism industry in Taiwan in the coming years? What would you like to see change the most?
So I think I hope that in 10 years, our communities will no longer be framed as tourism resources, but to be seen as cultural subjects. So it actually requires lots of basic changes. So we need to be aware of or recognize there are multiple knowledge systems. And I like what Cheryl said earlier. We also need to use tourism as a way to be a educational tool. So it can have the educational purpose inside. And the policy also, we need transformation. So from those KPI-driven models to community well-being. And also the community will probably also need a bit of transformation. So the youth need to be more, there need to be more young participants and culturally grounded development. And probably we also need to apply or look at the relational economies beyond the market dependency. And also, I think the industry also needs a bit of transformation as well, from the high volume to high value, low impact tourism, like Cheryl mentioned earlier. So we need to use tourism as a way to learn and to have conversation, to have more dialogue, but not just consumption. And so, yeah, these are my vision for the future.
That is truly a wonderful vision, and I also hope that all of those things will become true. Thank you so much for the conversation. Wagi Payan speaking to us from Taipei, and Cheryl Robbins in Taichung.